Most people are only strong for about 20 minutes. After that, things start to get really weird. Bar speed slows, positions drift, breathing turns into panic whispering. Suddenly, that lift that felt locked in looks like it's being negotiated with a hostile committee. Instead of asking why, people tell themselves a very comforting lie: I'm just tired. No, you're exposed. Because strength that only exists when you're fresh is not strength. It's a temporary alignment of favorable conditions. That's not a character flaw, it's actually just a training choice. Because here's the thing that nobody wants to hear: fatigue does not destroy strength, fatigue reveals what you have built. If your technique collapses late, it didn't suddenly become bad. If your trunk gives out, it wasn't suddenly weak. If your output disappears, it was not stolen. It just wasn't trained to survive this part of your session. Most training is designed around the beginning of the workout. You warm up, you hit that main lift, you chase a few numbers, then what? The back half of the session is treated like an afterthought. Accessory work, burners, finishers, let's get the pump on, which is ironic because the back half is where reality actually lives. Nobody fails when everything is aligned, rested, caffeinated with that pre-workout you just shoved down your throat. People fail when effort accumulates. Late in the session is where posture starts leaking, bracing gets lazy, coordination degrades, breathing becomes reactive. That's not a weakness issue, it's a durability issue. Durability is not a trait, it's an adaptation. You don't get it by wanting it more, you get it by pointing training in the right direction. Every training decision moves you towards something and then away from something else. If you train strength only in fresh conditions, you move towards peak output, but away from that late session reliability. Neither is morally superior, but pretending they're the same thing is how people really get confused. So let's call out that first main common mistake. People chase strength expression and assume durability will magically show up later. It doesn't. Durability is not a bonus feature in your training, it is a separate adaptation. You don't accidentally build it, you actually have to program for it. Here's how this usually ends up playing out for most people. Someone squats heavy once or twice a week, they feel strong, numbers go up, everything looks great on that paper or in that app. Then they try longer sessions, hybrid training, conditioning layered with lifting, competitions, real life stress, and suddenly they're not. They're discovering that their strength was conditional. Strong only when rested, neurologically fresh, braced perfectly, breathing calm, nothing else demanded their attention. Now, that's not fake strength, it's just narrow strength. And narrow strength will break when conditions start to widen. Now, diving a little bit deeper into the physiology, see that early in a session, strength is driven primarily by your neural drive, your motor unit recruitment, freshness of coordination. But late in the session, strength depends more on local muscular endurance, connective tissue tolerance, trunk stiffness under fatigue, breathing efficiency, and movement economy. Same muscles, different limiting factors. So if you only train the first set of qualities, the second set will fail on schedule, which is exactly what we tend to see. This is why people say things, I can lift this weight, just not after I'm tired, which is correct. That sentence already contains the diagnosis, though. Now, some of you might be thinking you already know the answer of what to do. Well, the answer is usually not just lift heavier, yelling more, adding more stimulants, pretending rest doesn't matter. Durability doesn't come from pretending fatigue is not real. It comes from training inside it, deliberately. And this is when the programming starts mattering for this kind of training. So if you want that strength that survives late in the session, you have to expose strength to fatigue without destroying quality. It's a very narrow window, and most people miss it on both sides. They either stay too fresh all the time or grind themselves into garbage. I know more people in that latter group than I really care to admit. Neither ends up building durable strength. But let's talk about how to train for late session strength without turning every workout into a suffering contest. First up, stop treating accessories like junk volume. Accessories are not where you just get tired. They're where to teach the body to hold position when output drops. If your main lift breaks down late, your accessories should target your trunk stability, postural endurance, unilateral control, breathing under load, not random pumps. For example, front-loaded split squats instead of leg presses, tempo rows instead of chasing max weight, carries instead of cable fluff. These point the compass towards durability, not just fatigue. The next thing you can do is use submaximal loads later, on purpose. The concept here people really hate. You don't need maximal loads to train strength late in the session. In fact, maximal loads late usually just train sloppiness. What you want to do is moderate load, longer sets, strict position standards, and minimal rest. This is going to teach you force application under fatigue, technique persistence, and bracing endurance. If the weight feels easy at first, and brutally honest by rep 8 or 9, you're in the right zone. The next thing you can do is train strength after mild fatigue, not total exhaustion though. There is a difference there, training in fatigue and training through collapse. If you're gasping, dizzy, emotionally bargaining with yourself, you went too far. The goal is compromised, not destroyed. Try this. Do a main lift and then short conditioning bout, and then do your controlled strength work. Or do carries before your squats, or sled pushes before presses. Now strength has to show up when conditions aren't ideal and without chaos. That's durability training. Another thing you can do is slow down the parts that usually fail. Like late in the session, people don't fail explosively, they fail subtly. Hips rise first, ribs flare, grip slips, breath holds. Tempo work is brutally effective here. Not because it's slow, but because it removes momentum as a crutch. Do tempo squats, pause presses, controlled eccentrics. If your position disappears when you slow it down, there's your leak. What you can do is respect breathing as a strength skill. This one gets ignored constantly. Late session strength is often limited by breathing, not your muscles. If your brace collapses every time you inhale, you don't have a strength problem, you have a pressure management problem. Training things like carries and front-loaded movements, extended sets with nasal breathing, this is going to help teach your trunk to stay organized while oxygen is moving. That ends up being real strength late in the game. And the final thing I recommend trying out is stop ending every session with a performance test. Not every workout needs a hero moment. If every session ends with max reps, AMRAPs, how bad can I make this? And we are all guilty of that, even myself at times. You're training nervous system burnout and not durability. Some days should end with positions held cleanly, output maintained without drama, no technical collapse. That doesn't look impressive, but it works extremely well. There ends up being a trade-off, and these trade-offs are usually the things that people don't want to talk about. Because training for late session strength will reduce peak expression slightly, feel less exciting, require restraint, and expose weaknesses you were probably avoiding. That's a cost. The benefit in strength that doesn't disappear is when sessions run long, conditioning is layered in, stress is high, recovery is not perfect. You're moving toward durability and away from fragile peak output. It's a directional choice you need to make in your programming and your training. With all this, people end up getting a little bit defensive. They hear this and think, I shouldn't chase PRs. No, it means you shouldn't confuse PRs with preparedness. Peak strength has a place, but it is also not the only form of strength that matters, especially in your life, sport, or health is unpredictable. And yes, this applies especially well with aging lifters. As margins tend to shrink, durability matters more. You don't get fewer bad days as you age, you just get punished harder for ignoring them. Strength that survives imperfect conditions becomes more valuable than the strength that shines once every month. So let's say this as cleanly as possible. If your strength disappears late in the session, your training pointed towards expression, not persistence. Now that's not a failure, it's just information. And information is useful if you don't get emotional about it. And this is where you need to stop asking yourself, what's the best program out there for me? And start asking, what adaptation am I actually buying with this? So you stop outsourcing judgment and you stop steering your training to what you need to do. That's adulthood in training. Remember, training is not a performance for applause, it's rehearsal for instability. Late in the session is instability. If your training collapses there, it didn't prepare you for what you are asked to handle. My final thought in all of this is that durable strength is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't need perfect conditions, it doesn't just show up again and again. When you're tired, when things drift, when the session runs long, when the life leaks into the gym, that's the metric. If your strength can survive that, it's real. If it can't, you know exactly which direction to point the compass towards next.